do when life throws its darkest storms at you? When faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges, where do you find the strength to keep moving forward? Today on Lifejacked, the Resilience Podcast, we're diving deep into these questions with an extraordinary individual whose life story reads like a testament to the power of the human spirit. My guest is Andy Campbell. He's not just a survivor, he is a thriver. From confronting the trauma of childhood abuse and bullying, coping with profound personal losses, overcoming stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and enduring the heartbreak of losing his youngest son to suicide, Andy has faced some of life's grimmest trials. But through it all, he has transformed his journey into one of hope and resilience. As an inspirational author, he shares his wisdom in his book, Overcoming Life's Toughest Setbacks, 15 breakthrough core beliefs to transform challenges into opportunities. On this episode, join me, Dr. Rowe, as we explore with Andy how his core beliefs have not only guided him through these formidable challenges, but have empowered countless others to dance in the rain. Hi, Andy. Welcome. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. How are you?
Good afternoon, Dr. Rowe. How are you? It's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes. I love the fact that you agreed to be on the show, and I think it's going to be a great conversation about resilience today. I mean, you definitely have a few life-jacked moments. So, thank you so much for being vulnerable and being willing to come on and share your story. And yes, I believe that it will inspire somebody. So, Andy, to start off, can you share a bit about that initial moment when you realized that resilience would be your key to survival and ultimately your tool for thriving?
I think it started very early, honestly. What I didn't know was how it was going to work out or what tools I would use, the means by which I would become resilient. But I had been able to watch those who came before me, and they seemed like what now we would call resilient people. They had a lot of problems and they fought their way through them, and they struggled. So I would say early on, I had examples of people who were resilient, and probably none more than my mother when she had her 11-year battle with cancer. I think she taught me more about how to live as she in essence, died over those 11 years, right? The ups and downs of her breast cancer and the fight and struggle that she went through. So I think it was probably about there where I started to get an idea that there was more to it than just not, like not quitting. Like she had a determination, a grit, a way of persisting, and I thought that's what I want. That's what I need. And so I think it was probably in my early 20s when I had to be 18, 19, 20, right in there where I realized that she was giving me the example of what we would later call resilience.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And it's great when you have a parent, mother, whether it's mother or father, that can give you that example, because it does really lay the foundation. I really do believe that. I recognize with my own sons how I lead myself on a day-to-day basis. And I make sure that they don't just see the joys and the happy moments. I also try to make sure that they see me go through disappointments and sadness and, setbacks. And I kind of talk them through, this is what I've decided to do in spite of. So it's great that you also had that model as well. Now, I want to talk.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's, I don't know whether she intended to leave that with me, but there were highs and there were lows. And so I did observe, and I was able to kind of see when she thought things were going really well, and then all of a sudden they fell off the cliff and they weren't well. I could observe her coming back out of those. So it was a whole rounded view of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and still left an example of how to persist.
Wow, that's amazing. So I want to talk about your book, which is titled Overcoming Life's Toughest Setbacks, 15 breakthrough core beliefs to transform challenges into opportunities. And it outlines 15 core beliefs, as it says in the title. So, can you tell us exactly how you develop these beliefs and which one that you may have found to be the most pivotal in transforming your challenges into opportunities?
I see when you speak words, I hear the words, but in my mind I see pictures. So I guess I'm visual, and I would observe or realize after having gone through something or part of the way through something, I realized that there were certain kind of principles that I could visualize and that I could put into a phrase. And then that phrase would kind of be like a meta statement. It would represent the picture that I saw in my mind. And so as I collected those over time, when I would notice something that I thought would be useful in surviving, I would write it down. And over time, I collected 15 of those over 30 years or so, 40 years. I collected 15 of them, and they just kind of became, once I kind of put them on paper in one place, they kind of became the core beliefs. I think the one that sets the stage for all the others is, and it's listed as the first one for a reason, which is no one outruns the universe. And to me, what that ultimately symbolizes is that we are responsible for ourselves, our actions, how we deal with the challenges in life, and that you can't just pretend, you can't ignore the challenges you face. You can't ignore being responsible for yourself. You can't go around blaming everyone else. That's not how the universe is designed. So no one outruns the universe to me is a way to say, remember that you can't blame other people for your problems. You can hold them responsible for their actions, but you can't blame you are responsible for how you respond to that and what you do to work yourself out of the problem. It wasn't my responsibility that I was abused sexually as a child, but over time I realized that that was affecting my life in negative ways. That becomes my responsibility. So I can't just outrun the universe and continue to blame somebody else for what I'm now aware of. So that's
No, that's
probably it's the number one for a reason.
no, that's so true. I truly believe that because I know that we carry a lot of things with us after something happens to us, right? And one of those things is that we kind of blame and hold on to grudges and, the awful things that, happen to us. And we just hold them, right? And we realize, after a while, like it can actually do something to you health wise because you're holding on to it because it creates like this tense aura in your body when you're holding on to grudges and you're holding on to things that happen to you. And you're right. It's like you have to free them. You have to free them from you and not let it hold you down and hold on to you. Because if you're constantly blaming, and even though it may be somebody else's fault, I truly, understand that. Because people do things to us. Like you said, you went through, childhood abuse, which we'll talk about in this interview, but we can't continue to be held victim, right? And be trapped by those experiences because they can really be inhibiting. So I want to talk about now the child abuse that you experienced. And, when we have various childhood experiences, they can last with us for a very long time because those are the things that happen to us first, right? And so those are the memories that are going to be etched in our minds for the longest. So, how do you feel that facing those challenges as a child kind of shaped you and as far as your perspective on resilience?
I would say that it shaped me not in the most positive or optimal way. I think it's one, and obviously it's personal to me, but I think it's one of probably, it is a heinous kind of act, really, to sexually abuse a child. There's no consent involved, even though you may go through that, and one may constantly question themselves about their participation in it, or what could they have done, or should they have done something. I've heard about that, and I've experienced some of that myself. It's But you have no consent, and I think for me, the way it changed my perspective on life, uh, I suspect this is true for many people who have been sexually abused as a child. It upends your perspective of life, right? It changes your perspective of your own self-worth, of your value, of your ability to have some control over your life. It gives you a negative view of the world. You become very distrusting. At least I became very distrusting. Very. I, I ended up becoming someone who catastrophized everything, and I think that was because I was concerned about how could I avoid a catastrophe. So I would think about everything in catastrophic terms, and then try to work to prevent that from happening. I think how it affected me and how it came to be part, and the reason why I talk about it, is because I think we are actually children are far more resilient. They shouldn't have to they shouldn't have to go through that. That is a bad situation, a terrible experience. But I learned that we can come back from those things. We can overcome uh, what has been put upon us. And so the story of resilience, I think, there is looking back, is that um, we can be resilient. Children are in many ways resilient, and I think it's a matter of, over time, we have to face what that experience or those experiences have done to us, how it shaped our lives. And part of the resilient story, part of being resilient, is having the discipline, the courage. I should not discipline, the courage and the responsibility to take the actions to deal with things through therapy, maybe process like EMDR. Separate yourself from the emotions that those experiences left behind, so that you can properly process them and get that weight off of our shoulders. Right, the
Yeah.
experience will never leave, but there are ways to remove the emotion from those experiences. So I think that is kind of a both a testament to resilience and a means to being resilient.
Yes. No, absolutely. And, you know, even aside from the child abuse that you did, well, and even deeper, I mean, it's child sexual abuse that you experience, and then just facing serious illnesses, and then the loss um, of a loved one. Do you feel like that you've had support systems in your life?
I have. I have. Um,
Do you feel like
I
they're
thank God every
important for
day.
people to have?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. One does not want to walk this journey alone. This
Mhm.
is, you don't want to be the guy who was robbed and beaten, and you hope for a good Samaritan to show up. That's
Mm.
a risky proposition. You need to have some people around. Now, I was unfortunate in the fact that my mother died. She was kind of the tether that held my father in place. And after she passed away, we ended up becoming estranged. My wife's family had both her parents had passed away. So we really had to raise our children, kind of grow up ourselves. So we kind of became each other's support system. Maybe not the best way
Mhm.
to do it, but you do what you do when you're there. And then we had a church as a community. And we had through these things, we ended up, oddly enough, building a community with our family physician, with a couple of therapists. When you don't have a natural like support system, I think there are ways, and you should make the decision to build a support system, to reach out and kind of create your own support system, because you do need you need people who are not in the emotional attachment of your of your experiences. So yeah, I think
Mhm.
community is tremendously important, whether you have it or you have to put the effort into kind of creating your own. Um, they say no man is an island. I think you can be an island. I just don't know that you can survive very long being an island.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, because a lot of activities, you can kind of do alone, right? And some journeys are meant to take alone and they're not meant to take in a group. Some of those journeys I've had myself, but I've realized, okay, well, I need to drown out all the noise and I don't
Hmm.
necessarily
Hmm.
need community. And then there are other times when I recognize that, no, I need, my human capital. I need the people who can surround me and lift me up and help me get through, whatever I'm facing. And I believe that you have to have the courage to know, right, when is the time to go at it alone and when is the time to call in your troops to kind of, come and support you.
Well, and I
So
think an example of that with my son was, look, there's certain things that have only, it's a club you don't want to be in, and
yeah,
sadly, there's too many people in it.
yeah.
But there's not a lot of people other than those people who have been associated with it, go through it, who can have a level of comprehension of the entirety of the situation, not just the loss of a child, but how it occurred and what it means to the rest of the siblings and to to my wife and so in that case, we joined a couple of groups that were around the topic of parents who had lost children to suicide, and that community, even that kind of stepping out to get into joining that community, was critical to getting through it. I think also as critical is knowing when it's time to move from that community to a different community,
Mm.
because we don't want to always stay in that place. Like there's a time where we need support, and we need support from people who truly understand what we're going through. But if you're going to move forward, then you can't always just stay in that place with that emotion. You need to have the courage to step out of that and move to the next step in the phase, or next phase in the process.
Yeah. Now, I know one thing that you mentioned about courage is that it's a stepping stone to determination. So,
Mhm.
how is embracing courage? I mean, in your opinion, how do you feel like it's directly influenced your own journey of resilience?
One thing that I've realized is that courage is you. I think a lot of times we hear stories about courage, and they're big. Like it was very courageous, and so at least for me, I thought that courage was about big things. Somebody's on the beach in Normandy and they're running into a hail of bullets. And when you're I came to realize that when you're you've had a really bad setback, you're in a difficult situation. So, like the loss of our child, courage can just be getting out of the bed today, right? Courage can come in that is a hugely courageous act when everything in your body is telling you that there is no reason to get out of bed. um, Life has lost kind of its meaning, and you still do it. You get out of bed, and you might not take a shower that day, but you got out of bed. That is a huge step. That is a huge act of courage. And to me, determination, the next step in the process, is just courage. If you show courage over and over and over again, people will say that person is very determined. But what they see as determination is really just really small acts of courage all in a row, over and over and over again. So I'm a big believer that we shouldn't limit ourselves, waiting for that large, courageous moment. We're doing little acts of courage all day long, right? When you're coming through a very difficult experience, and when you are, working your way back from a setback, every step forward you take, every small act you take when everything in you is telling you you don't have the energy, you don't, you're in the state of despair, you don't think you can make it another day. Making it another day is an act of courage, and you should celebrate that, even if it's just in your own head. You should, don't diminish that small act of courage, because if you do that enough times, you will realize that you're actually not just courageous, you're very determined. And if you show determination enough, that's what people call perseverance.
No, that's spectacular. I, you know, I have to ask you though, because I know that the loss of a child is unbearable. I mean, I couldn't even imagine. I have my three sons, and the thought of one of them not being here, I'm sure I would go through every emotion that you and your wife went through. But what's interesting is, like you said, you may lay down in the bed and you may want to pull the covers over your head, but you got to get up, right? You got to. And what I admire about you is that you've continued to advocate for resilience despite, what you and your wife have gone through. So I have to ask you, yes, you have to get up, but where do you find that strength, that courage? Like, where do you find that to keep going and to be able to share your story with others?
So I was raised in a very religious family, and I'm certain that I am not the model example that they had hoped for. But um, what I learned from a very early age, and like I said, watching people who had very difficult lives. My family came from an extremely poor background, very poor, and watching them and being raised, at these people about, I was in church more before I turned 15 years old than most people go in their lives, because it was like you went to a revival this week, and then you were in Sunday, and then you had to be in Wednesday, and when you weren't just doing that, you were back in revival. Then there was camp meeting. It was like it was always something.
Yeah.
But one thing I did take away from all that, I do have a confident and firm belief that we were all created uh, for a purpose, that we were created out of an act of love. I mean, by our creator, we were created in an act of love, and that each of our lives is a thread in the fabric of the universe. And that, if our thread is not there, then there is a hole in the universe. And I know that may sound kind of pie in the sky, but to me, I believe that every human being is extremely valuable. And even though at some moment we may not feel valuable, we may not feel loved, we may feel in a state of despair, I believe that we were created to be, and we are, important. And so, in my places of despair, and on those days when I thought, is this all there is? Why am I even doing this? Why am I still alive? I went back to that belief that we all are very important, and that no matter what I'm going through or have been through, I believe there is something more for us in this life to do. And so if we're here, we should put our effort into being responsible for ourselves and doing all we can to better ourselves and put ourselves in a position to fulfill whatever it is that we're supposed to fulfill. And it doesn't have to be fulfilling some, you don't have to be, you know, king, you don't have to be president, you don't have to be a billionaire, you don't have to be any of those great things. Our purpose in life may just be to be the one that walks down the street and says hello to somebody, and we don't know it, but they are in a terrible, terrible spot. And maybe the point of our life was to keep them from going down the street and killing themselves. I don't know. It can be,
Right.
purpose and it can change over time. But what has seen me through at the very, very, very foundational level has been that I have never lost my belief that every life is important.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, every life is important. And I do believe that is a good way to, think about things and go through life, because it can be incredibly difficult, incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
But if you think about every single life that you encounter is important, and you give people the respect that they deserve, even when you may not want to.
Yeah.
But
Look, 100%. Right. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
look, I think I have come to believe, or I've come to kind of, I guess for me, accept that. I think part of the challenge with resilience is like, people can struggle because they think of the world as a good place with
Mhm.
problems. I
Yeah.
think of the world as a very difficult place with moments of happiness. And
Mm,
so in those days where I can be happy for a few minutes, or I can walk outside and look up and the sky is blue and the trees are green and there's a bird singing, or there's children down the street. Like after losing my son, I love to hear children playing down the street. I mean, I don't think I really paid attention to it before, but
mhm, mhm,
um, so I have come to appreciate the moments that are not tragic.
mhm.
And so I think it's part of being resilient is, in my opinion, is facing the reality that life is hard. It was
Yeah.
never designed to be easy. It's not going. And if you've had some easy times, man, be very, very thankful for that. And because we're all going to hit the wall, we're all going to have some difficulties. And so I think part is not taking those good moments, those minutes or hours of joy or happiness for granted, and being
Yeah.
super thankful for those. Because I think that helps sustain you through. You're not as disappointed when the difficult times come. The rainfall just and the unjust. Like we all have these problems, or some type of problem. And so I think being resilient is it's also, there's an element of it that's not just getting through the difficulties, it's being thankful for the times when you have a break.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do believe that life it's the ebb and flow, right? It's the
Yeah.
ebb and flow. It's the peaks, it's the valleys, it's the highs, it's the lows, if you
Yeah.
just want to use some simple words. Um, and you want to think that your life should be rainbows and sunshines and smelling the flowers and all the time, but just like the weather, I mean, it is not
Yeah.
nice and blue skies and sunny all the time. Sometimes there's a thunderstorm, sometimes there's a tornado, sometimes a hurricane, a
Yeah.
hailstorm, name it, right? So even the weather has its moments of highs and lows. And so, in our lives, I think we do have to recognize that we are going to go through trials. But as you said, with having the courage and the determination and perseverance, you recognize that you can still get up every single day, and you find those moments, like you said, listening to the children playing outside, that can give you some sort of joy inside it that you never thought would be there before. I mean, that's spectacular. It just really is. Now,
Yeah.
I want to talk about one of your core beliefs in your book. And that core belief is every challenge has a chewy nougat center. That sounds like a Snickers to me, which I
it,
really
it, it
love.
is. I may have been a fan. I may have been a fan.
Yes. But you said every challenge has a chewy nougat center made of opportunity. That's quite unique. I mean, I never thought of it that way, because if you get in the middle of a Snickers, I mean, it's to die for. It's rich and
Yeah.
it's
You got to
negative.
work through it. You got to work
Exactly.
through it. And
So can you
so
elaborate? What does that mean for life? What does that mean?
well, so I'll start with, I've never liked the phrase, every cloud has a silver lining. And I didn't like it because if every cloud had a silver lining, why would I ever go like into the dark cloud? I would just hang out on the outside in the silver lining. I'd just have that. But it seems like to me that, um, it's more real to think of problems as not having a silver lining, but deep in the core of that problem, way down inside, after you work through all the difficulties, there will be some small, nugget, some sweet nougat in the center of that problem that you can take away from it. That will, in some way, help you survive the next problem. It will give you some level of insight, and it's kind of how I came up with the 15 core beliefs. Like those were all things that were sitting way inside these problems. That as I would, as I would work through them or survive them, I would observe this, this little piece of what I thought was wisdom that would show up. And so that's where that one came from. That, and I really liked milk chocolate candy bars before I, it's a long story. I had to do a long 10-day water only fast during my cancer treatment, or in between cancer treatments. And when I came out of the fast, I didn't like milk chocolate anymore. Now I can only eat dark chocolate. And I hated dark chocolate before. But when I wrote that down. I liked, milk chocolate cookie bar, candy bars.
Yeah.
But I think I think it is. And it's also, to me, like a gut check, like it's reality that, you know, anything positive you can take from a difficult situation, you're going to have to work to find that goodness in it. It's there, but it's not just going to easily show itself. You have to get through the hard stuff to find any goodness you can take away from that experience. But I do
Yeah.
believe it's there. And if we put the effort in, we can at least take something away from it other than the scar.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you mentioned, that you went through your cancer treatments. And as I said before, you went through pancreatic cancer. And I mean, I'm sure that your experience with cancer probably brought many physical and emotional challenges, I'm sure, because, we never think that we would end up having to literally fight for our lives. When we're in this day-to-day journey of what is called our life.
Mhm.
So, how did you stay mentally strong and focused on your goals despite such an immense personal battle for your life?
Well, I think so. Okay. Let me diverge for just a second. Yeah, you maybe, you probably heard the cliche, "How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time."
Right.
And
Mhm. I
I saw
used
a
that
video
actually today
once.
with someone.
Okay, so what nobody tells you about that cliche, okay, nobody says what that really means. Like,
Mhm.
how do you eat the elephant woman? So I happened to see this video, a YouTube video, and it was a pack of hyenas had come across, they come across the carcass. It was like a day old, so it's pretty fresh in their minds. It's pretty fresh. And but it was a huge bull elephant, right? So for them, this is like a manna from heaven. Like,
Right.
they just stumble up upon this massive bull elephant who's dead. They're like, this is wonderful.
Mhm.
But the narrator's explaining that the hide, even the mouth, everything about the elephant is too tough to eat. Like, they can't get through it. So they know on the inside there's muscle, there's organs,
Mhm.
there's all this stuff that they want. They can't
Yeah.
get to it. So they have to start at the softest place on the elephant. And that, sadly, is the anus, the worst possible place to start. And they work their way from that really bad place all the way
Mhm.
through the elephant until they can get to the good stuff. And I
Mm.
thought, well, that's kind of like a problem,
Mm.
when people say, well, if you're just gonna, confront it, just eat that elephant one bite at a time. And it's like, you don't quite, you never told me where I was gonna have to start the
Right.
process of eating the elephant, right?
Yes.
And right. So I think I just held that visual in my mind every time I hear that. Now I'm like, yeah, well, why don't we tell them where they have to start when you tell them to eat the elephant one bite at a time. But I think I think that's important to just realize that you're going to have to start the process, maybe in not the best situation with the best, you know, the best part of the elephant facing you, but we can get through these things, and you just have to accept that you have to work through the difficult part uh, to continue on the process.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Now, you speak about the importance of persistence in many of your core beliefs. So, do you think you could share an example where, like, I mean, from your own life? I mean, of course, you have the many examples that we've mentioned before of your life jacked moments that have been, severely like life jacking. um, but can you like kind of share an example from your life where perseverance led you to really like break through?
The most recent example was in the aftermath of my son's suicide. My wife and I met with a grief counselor, and she was a absolutely wonderful woman. Just a great heart. Uh, she understood our philosophical background. Her father's a minister, and she just had an ability to help kind of carry us in that moment. But when that time, after several months, 6 months came, it became apparent we needed, like she had gotten us through the initial shock. We needed to do something a little different. I had heard about this technique called EMDR. And so I pursued that. And eventually my wife pursued that. And I think, when you start that process, and what happened was the trauma of finding my son's body and dealing with the aftermath and the pain of his loss. Uh, that kind of pain will put pressure on everything. It will expose every weakness in your psyche and emotionally, even physically. And going through the process of EMDR to me was one place where perseverance was necessary, because every single session that I did was an opportunity to not do another session. Because one session led to the next, which led, I started out with finding my son's body, and then that led to dealing with the years where, he had talked about suicide, and then that led to the cancer treatments, and then and it led to one thing after another. So I think I remember the therapist, writing down the topics for EMDR, and it's never good when they're filling them out on a legal pad, and they flip the page and they keep writing line by line, and they flip the page again, and then they just decide to stop, and they're like, maybe we just take care of this. And I didn't want to. I didn't want to go back. And she explained to me what EMDR was and how it's going to work and how wonderful it was going to be, how it's going to help me. And I didn't want to go back and experience any of those things again. I thought they were all put in a box. I had them all tucked away. They'd all been dealt with. And she told me that they had not been dealt with. And she gave me examples of why they hadn't been dealt with. And I said, but I don't want to do this. I'm not going to do this. And she said, look, Andy, you have one choice. You can either, your choices, you have two choices, one decision. You can either deal with this for what would amount to less than 24 hours. Let's say there was like 21 hours. I think she had we'll do 21 sessions. It was supposed to be 8, but she kept turning the page. And so she said, so in fewer hours than one day, you can work to free yourself from the emotional response to these memories in fewer hours than one day. Or you can live with them for every moment, for every day of the rest of your life. And I thought, well, that didn't sound good. So I'll just take the one day. Now, the one day was 1 hour a week for a long time, but it basically was. And I think that was an example where perseverance really turned the tide for me, because in that process, and that's kind of like that chewy nougat center inside of a challenge, or that opportunity that sits inside of a challenge. It was my son's suicide that, by working to deal with that, I was able to deal with other things. And
Yes.
by having perseverance to go back each week when I didn't want to, I didn't want to go through another one. That led me to the place where, because I could separate the emotion had been separated from the memory, Dr. Rose, something really strange happened. I was
Mm.
finally able to forgive people because
Mm.
the emotion tied to the memory of what people had done to me had been separated from the memory. And so, with just dealing with the memory, I was actually able to exercise forgiveness, which took that load off of my shoulders. Now, that's completely unexpected, right? But by showing perseverance, and I don't mean that it's like not tooting my own horn or something. I'm just saying, like, by showing, as an example, by showing perseverance, I actually got something out of the process I never expected. I ended up removing the emotional attachment and baggage that I'd been carrying around for all these years that I didn't realize I was carrying around.
Mhm.
And when I did that, the unexpected thing was I was finally able to forgive people. I forgave my son. I forgave the people who sexually abused me.
Mm.
Didn't change their responsibility, but all of a sudden I was free from the weight of the anger, the hatred, the anxiety, all the stuff that comes with those experiences. And so I would say, to me, that was an example where perseverance actually led to finding that chewy nougat center of goodness that was inside that challenge. Perseverance is critical. If you don't persevere, you can't finish. And then if
Yeah.
you can't finish, what's the point? If you're not going to finish,
Right.
what's the point?
Well, I love that you were able to forgive those people, because I heard a saying once that forgiveness is the antidote to the I think the bad experiences that are poisoning our lives, right? I mean that, and if you're
Yeah.
able to forgive people, because it really is, those experiences are holding you hostage. But once you're able to separate, like you said, the experience and then the people, it really becomes the antidote, like you said, and it's very freeing. It's very, very
Oh,
freeing.
it is. It
Because if
is.
not, it is poison. It is poisoning our bodies. I mean, down to, it could be giving you, stress is, inside
Oh,
of
I
you.
look,
Yeah.
I apologize for interrupting, but let me just tell you, I'm absolutely
No, it's okay.
convinced that all of those experiences and
Yeah.
all the emotion that I had no idea was still attached. I thought it was all gone. It was all good. I didn't realize how much I was carrying around until it was gone. Right? It's like, wow, I'm convinced that it contributed to my pancreatic cancer. Do I have a genetic mutation that makes me more susceptible to that? I do. Is that
Yeah.
the reason? I don't know. For 53 years, I didn't have pancreatic cancer. But, over time, I just think the buildup of those emotions, the anger toward, people who had done things to me, my own kind of loathing of how I was, and like you
Yeah.
stack all that stuff up, and is it surprising that it shows up in your body in some way? I don't. Looking back on it, I think it's probably surprising it took 53 years for something bad to show up.
Mm, mm. And I think it's incredibly heavy, right? Carrying it at times, if you're not going to release it through forgiveness and the release of the pain that you're holding on. I mean, I feel like when we hold on to it, like, who is it really helping? Because I don't think it's helping anyone. And it's certainly not helping us if we continue to hold on to it. It can cause, like you said, stress. And I mean, not that you know for sure whether or not it contributed to your cancer, but like you said, it may not have helped either.
It definitely didn't help. All right. Okay.
Right.
So we might have been like, oh, that's the thing. But I can assure you, somewhere in that equation, it was unhelpful.
Right.
And yeah, and I think it is, like, it kind of goes back to that no one outruns the universe. The universe has these principles where I think forgiveness is never for the person you've forgiven. It's actually, for yourself to unload that burden of the whatever you're holding, that animosity, that hatred, like you're the one unburdening yourself. That nobody tells you exactly how to do that, which is what I thought was so interesting about once I was able to let the emotion was able to unhook itself from me, that I
Yeah.
was finally able to experience that. But yeah, I think it is, wow, it is so exhausting because
Yeah.
what you really try to do is outrun the principles of the universe. And that's a hard thing. The universe is a big, heavy thing. And so if you're just carrying around this stuff that the universe is designed so that you don't carry that, it is. It is physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally exhausting. And I had no idea until I started inadvertently working my way out of it. And then you kind of get halfway into it and you're like, maybe I will go back to the next session. Like this is better than I thought it would be. And then after you do that, you're like, man, I wonder if there's any other bad things I could get rid of. Like
Yeah.
you just kind of become encouraged by it because things become lighter.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Wow. Now I have to go to one more core belief you have in your book, because this one is huge and it was definitely huge for me. And that's your belief that compete only with yourself. Compete only with yourself. For me, that speaks volumes because, and especially with social media, I
Yeah,
mean, how do you not compete with others? I mean, it encourages comparison all the time. I mean, how do you maintain a personal, laser focus to prevent these external pressures, right? That are going to and potentially impact your journey? Because, it's like, oh, I look at my life and I'm thinking, I mean, of course I do have my doctorate and that's something that I wanted to get myself, right? But then you look around and it's like, well, this person's getting one and this person's getting one and now this person's getting one. I mean, my timeline on LinkedIn is just full of graduations, which I'm happy, right? But you start wondering, like, are we all doing this because everybody else is doing it, so we feel like that's what we need to do? Or you go on, Instagram, you're like, well, so and so's taking a vacation with their family in Disney and this, and you're like, wait, am I
and
supposed to take
it
some
was
more vacation?
perfect. They were
Yeah,
all went to Disney. They had no arguments. The children were
right,
happy. The weather was perfect. They didn't go
right.
in debt to do it. Like everything is perfect with them.
Everything
What's
is
wrong with
perfect,
me?
right? They make reels and everything. And
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
wait
You
a
don't
minute.
see what happens when they turn that phone off, though, right? Like they're wailing on each other. Um, yeah, so. I think there's so many applications to that one, and I want to be completely transparent about this. The core beliefs to me are aspirational. I don't do them right every day. I don't follow them like a monk would do it. I'm not they represent to me a means by which I can recenter myself. And so I work to remember only compete with yourself when I find myself starting to think that way, or I have been thinking that way and I find myself questioning myself, or thinking lesser of myself because I'm not where these people are at. Like I think there's an appropriate place for competition, and sports obviously an appropriate place for competition. Businesses compete, and they have to, how do they measure themselves against other businesses in their industry or similar industries? Those things make sense. But when you're dealing with the things that are inside you, when you're dealing with either past traumatic experiences or a health challenge that you're going through, or the loss of a loved one, or you're recovering from, childhood sexual abuse, or whatever the situation is, I believe in those endeavors, the worst thing we can do is compare ourselves to someone else. First, we don't know what they're actually going through. We don't know where they are. We only know what they present. All right, there's a guy I heard on the radio one time. I think his name was Dennis Prager, I think, but I heard him this one time, and he was telling a story about he had gone home and he was complaining to his mother about how all his friends had a better life, like they had a happy family, they had all this stuff, and she said, um, Dennis, the only happy people I know are people I don't know well. And I thought, man, that's pretty bright, because that, like, the only happy people I know on social media are people I don't know well. Because if I look at social media and I know them, I'm like, that's BS. Like I saw you 20 minutes before that. You were yelling
Yeah.
at your wife. Your kids were running around. Like you were in shambles. And now you take a selfie with a happy face. What the hell was that? And so I think I just work to remind myself. I do it like everyone else does. You look around you and you think, wow, could I, how are they? Even when you go through grief, you might be in a grief group and you look around and you go, how are they doing so well? And I'm still in so much pain. Absolutely the wrong thing to do.
Mm,
All you have to do is a little bit better yourself. Don't
Yeah.
look at what somebody else is going through, because you don't know the setbacks they've had in between. Like, they look good right now, but yesterday they were 10 steps backwards, and today they're just 2 steps forward. You didn't see how far they slid backwards yesterday. You don't know what's going to happen to them tomorrow. So I just think
Absolutely.
when we're working ourselves back, when we're in the process of coming back from a setback, I think we can look at people and say, like, I'd look at my mother and say, I want to be like her. I want to do that. But I don't compare myself to what she went through. What she went through was completely different than what I've gone through. The circumstances are not the same. So I think aspirationally, we can look at people and say, wow, and I would personally, like, I hope that by telling my story, there's someone out there who's like, I don't think I can make it. I'm in despair. I'm not sure I can make it another day. I would like them to, hear my story and go, well, maybe I can make it. Maybe there is kind of that, there's somebody who can kind of set an aspirational target for me that I could make it another day. And I think
Mhm.
that by only comparing yourself to yourself, compare yourself to yesterday. Are you a little bit better today than you were yesterday? If you're not, give yourself some grace. Just tomorrow, try to get a little bit better than you are today. And it is a long race. I think you also have to remember, I used to try to tell my children, or I did tell my children, when they would bring up how someone else was doing, I would remind them, we're all different and we're on different tracks. But sometimes when you think you're behind somebody,
Yeah.
it's because you're about to lap them. Okay. Like, you're so far ahead of them, you're about to lap them, but your view is that they're ahead of you when really
Mhm.
they're not ahead of you. We're on different tracks.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, don't compare yourself. And if you do, then remember that core belief, compete on it with yourself, and
Mhm.
recenter yourself back to focusing on your journey.
Yeah. Oh, wow, man. So let me ask you, amidst all the trials and tribulations, what do you feel like has been the greatest lesson that you've learned within all of this? And like, how do you apply it to your daily life so that it remains filled with joy and purpose?
I remind myself, do not quit. Do not quit. Your ancestors had it very difficult and they did not quit. Your people have had it difficult and they did not quit. You have been through things before, maybe not as severe as what you're going through right now, but you did not quit then and you survived that. Do not quit now. And so whenever I get into a place of despair or down, I, I work now to tell myself it's okay. You're just down right now, but do not quit. My grandmother told me late in her life that she had 6 children, and in the 1930s, I think it was around the 1930s, um, maybe early 1940s, her sixth one was born, and he died less than a year old. And she told me that when he took his last breath, everything in her field of vision became grayscale. It was just black and white. There was no color. So if she looked outside, she didn't see green grass. She saw a shade of gray. If she looked at a tree, the sky, everything was a shade of gray. It was just black and white or some grayscale image. And that, she was a very religious woman, read her Bible, prayed every day. And she told me, she goes, I don't know how long it took, but I didn't quit living even though everything was gray. And then one day I woke up and the world had color again. I could see color in the trees, in the sky, in the grass, and I knew I had survived. And I have held on to that as, a way to remind myself, do not quit. Because even though everything is grayscale today, you can't see any color in your life today. If you stay long enough, if you stay in the game long enough, you will wake up one day and there will be color. And, it may not be the whole day is color. Maybe in the beginning it's still kind of sort of gray, but there will be flashes of color. But eventually, you'll get back to where the day is filled with color. So don't quit. That's what I remind myself. Don't quit.
Wow. Well, it's hard to believe that we are at the end of this interview, but I have one last question that, of course, that I ask all of my guests. And that is, in your opinion, what is the best way to build resilience?
I think it's kind of a combination of steps. One, live like you believe, even if in the moment you don't, that your life is valuable and that it has purpose and that you are a part of the universe, that you are important. Even if you don't believe it, do your best to live that way until you can believe it. Have courage in small amounts each day and set your goal to be to finish this life in a natural way. Give the creator, the universe, give it time to change the summation of your life. And so that's what I think leads to resilience, is a belief that we are unique and special, that we are important, and that we approach life daily acting out small bits of courage, and that we work toward finishing the life that we've been giving in the most honorable way that we can.
Wow. Well, Andy, your story is more than an inspiration. It's a beacon of hope, showing us all that no matter how tumultuous the storm, there's always a path forward, illuminated, by resilience and belief. Thank you for sharing your incredible journey with us today on this episode, and for imparting the wisdom and tools we can all use to forge paths of courage and transformation. For our listeners and viewers who are eager to dive deeper into Andy's journey, be sure to explore his book, Overcoming Life's Toughest Setbacks. I have it here on the screen. 15 breakthrough core beliefs to transform challenges into opportunities. And so lastly, Andy, before we sign off, could you please let everyone know where they can connect with you and find more of your work and purchase a copy of your book?
Yeah, you can find me at my website, askandycampbell.com. That name comes from when people used to ask me how I was still alive, and or they would ask friends, did they know anybody who had survived pancreatic cancer? And they would say, well, ask Andy Campbell. He did. So I have a website, askandycampbell.com. And the book, you can find a link at the website, and it's on Amazon. If you search for my name, I believe it'll be the first search result that pops up.
Awesome. Any last words of encouragement for the listeners?
You are valuable. And no matter how you feel right now, you are valuable. And, um, you know, persevere and finish. Don't quit. Whatever you're going through right now, do not quit. Life will get better. It may take time. It may take years. I don't know how long it'll take, but eventually the world will be filled with color for you again. So don't quit.
You heard it. Don't quit. The world will be full of color once again. Andy, thank you once again for joining us. May your story continue to touch and transform lives for everyone everywhere. I want to wish you and your family nothing but blessings and abundance. Please take care.
Thank you.
Andy Campbell, everyone. Be sure to join me next time for more uplifting stories and insights on resilience. Until then, keep pushing forward, embrace the journey, and remember that every setback can lead to a greater comeback. Dr. Rowe, signing off.